So, welcome to Chazin-the-Dream. I'm Ethan, your host. I'm a New York-based organization development coach, and I love talking with people who are super exciting individuals who are doing great work in the field of culture transformation and creating compassionate workplaces. And I'm really excited today to have Jill Michal, CEO and co-founder of Kith Kin. So, just a little bit of background about Jill, and then we're going to dive right in. Jill's a passionate advocate for every person's health, beginning with her family and her friends. She's a wife, a mother of three, a caring friend, and throughout her career, Jill's been fortunate to have, as she says, collected an amazing circle of people who have helped shape her journey, her career, and her life. And if that's not impactful enough, Jill spent 20 years in healthcare, including 15 leading the United Way as its CEO. As the parent of a child with health issues and family members with health challenges, Jill co-founded Kith Kin. In her role as CEO, Jill's passion and her singular mission is delivering power into the hands of primary caregivers, who she calls KinKeepers, and we're going to dive into that in a minute, who are seeking work-life integration, not balance, integration, in their two roles, both in their work capacity and also their responsibility for managing the healthcare needs of their families. So welcome to Chasing the Dream, Jill.
Thanks so much for having me, Ethan. That was awesome. I so appreciate that. I think you may know me better than I know me at this point.
Do we all really know ourselves?
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
I'm sorry, but for those who weren't behind the scenes with us, we were talking before we hit that little record button about Zen and being in a calm place. And Jill, I really appreciate you coming on the program today and sharing your background and your experience. And I'd love to just right out of the gate ask about your 20 plus years spent in healthcare and what it is in a little bit more detail that led you to co-found Kith Kin.
Yeah. Well, to your point, I've spent almost my entire life somewhere in the healthcare, I'll call it even kind of healthcare adjacent space, right? Because there's so much more to health than what happens kind of within those four walls of a traditional delivery model, the doctor's office, the hospital, the healthcare system. And to your point earlier, I spent almost 14 years at United Way. And one of the really important things that I learned is so much happens in health between visits, right? That health that happens at home is the stuff that we see family members managing, loved ones, neighbors taking care of folks in their communities to help them regain or maintain their health. And so for me, it's, so much of this has been expanding that definition of health and healthcare to include that family and that those friends. And to your point, kind of the name of the company is Kith Kin, which is an old-fashioned term for friends and family, because we know that there's no one way that people care for the people they care about.
And I had asked, part of the reason I was so selfish and wanted you to come on the show was it seems like something that's coming up with greater frequency in my conversations with people who are in that health adjacent kind of space. And they're talking about this notion of the caregivers who are, the sandwich caregivers who are doing, as we talked about, people who are maybe parents or grandparents and also children, and the incredible stress and demand that that places on them. And while they're dealing with that, also they have work that needs to be done. And I'm curious how they came into the calculus of what Kith Kin can deliver. And also if you could share a little bit about what it is that Kith Kin actually provides.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, 73% of American employees are providing some type of caregiving. As people started to have kids later in life, as parents live longer, and continue to age, to your point, we have this massive sandwich generation. And what's crazy about it, as I enter my early 50s, is that the fastest growing population of the sandwich generation is actually millennials. And it's kind of crazy, right? So our generation was carrying around a binder, right? You downloaded stuff from your patient portal and took pictures of things and did all kinds of things and you stuck it in your binder, right? Millennials are looking at us like, seriously, you want me to put stuff in a binder? right? That is not exactly. Yeah, they're like, I'm sorry, all of this stuff needs to be on my phone. I need all my
Right.
people all in one place with all their stuff. And so that's actually what was the genesis of Kith and Kin. Our kin, you talked about the role of, or the term kin keeper. Our app is actually called the KinKeeper specifically because we spent over 1,000 hours talking to people and user research before we wrote a single line of code. And we had people taking care of kids with special needs, people taking care of aging parents, people dealing with their own situations, issues with their spouses. And what was interesting to me was that almost none of them actually referred to themselves as a caregiver, despite the fact that we spent a ton of time talking about kind of this care economy and caregiver solutions. The reality is the person says, just thinks of themselves as the parent, the spouse, the child of an aging parent. And so we were really trying to look for what is that word that means something to somebody, that is like represents that person who's playing air traffic control for all the appointments and reminders, central intelligence, making sure everybody knows what they know when they need to know it. And that's really how we came up with the kin keeper. It's that person in the family. And we named it that earlier in the year. And then back in June, we were very fortunate to get a little bit of uptick from the New York Times, who published an article around kin keeping. So I was like, all right, we're on to a little something here, because someone has to acknowledge this role. And you talked about it, it's these employees are also trying to maintain this second, arguably full-time job to be able to do this work.
Yeah, and I mean, I raised you in conversation actually when we're sitting around the table at Thanksgiving, and I'm throwing you kind of off guard maybe because we didn't talk about this, but you know, my wife has three older brothers, and we live with my mother-in-law who's 96 this month, and she's had a few falls and she's had some health issues. And we're sitting around the table, and I'm talking about the fact that my wife has to take care of her. My wife also manages my health care and all my surgeries I've had recently and all my issues because she has the health insurance that we're under. And my daughter, who's 24, also is starting to need health. And I mentioned, Kith and Kin. Her youngest older brother is married to a woman with MS, and he's on the board of the MS Society. And then the oldest brother has a wife who's a breast cancer survivor. And we were talking about, imagine if there was a place for the person in the family who is the kin keeper to be able to have all of that.
Yeah.
And that was the context. And it would be amazing if you could kind of share what your motivation was. You've kind of started to talk about it, about delivering such a platform, a web app, a mobile solution for somebody, let's say millennial, to have the ability to track all of that, and a little bit about what kind of information is literally at their fingertips.
Yeah.
Because the middle brother, who has no major health issues currently, his son just got married, and his son, we're sitting around the table saying he didn't even know his blood type.
Yeah.
And he didn't know if he had recently shots that covered Hep A or whatever. So, and that's when you came up in conversation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is. So I'll try to capture some of those things. You tell me what I didn't answer in that collective group, but maybe I'll kind of start, work backwards. So the KinKeeper app allows you to import, author, store, and flexibly share different information with different people the way you actually do in real life. So everything from your current medications to the list of all of those medications you tried that sucked, that made your feet turn purple, that gave you a rash, all of the things that don't exist anywhere in your medical records, to notes, right? Because one of the things we learned from folks is they're like, look, data does not solve my problem. You can give me as many patient portals as you want, and I'm going to take a sliver of that, right? I'm going to pull down my test results, my blood works and things. But what I really need to know is, what did somebody tell me, right? What did I Dr. Google about it? All of the information that exists entirely outside of medical records needs to come together in one place so that you can actually manage that information in a way that makes sense to you, so that you can be an effective advocate, both for yourself and for the people that you're caring for and about. The genesis for me was, I've got, a kid with behavioral health issues. I have another kid with really chronic stomach issues. I have a non-biological child with a whole host of other things. I had a best friend discharged to my house after breast cancer surgery because her whole family got the stomach flu while she was in the hospital. I've got, 4 aging parents, and I am just a medical shit show unto myself. So let's just call it what it is. I got a lot of stuff, right? There's a lot of
Right.
stuff going on,
Right.
and it all relies on me, right? I'm the kin keeper. And the true genesis for this was I was sitting in, you mentioned I had been in healthcare for 20 years, which means that I have attended like 400 incredibly boring conferences. And, I'm sitting there at one conference back in, I think it was the end of 2019, and they're talking about what we talk about a lot in the healthcare space, which is patient adherence, right? Which is this concept of how do you get people to do what they're supposed to do when it comes to
Right.
managing their health? How do you get them to take the pills and do the follow-up procedures and do all of the other things they're supposed to do? And they're talking about, doctors and pharmacists and the tools they have for all these folks and the tools they have for the therapists and this and that. And I'm sitting in the audience and I'm going, does anybody in here know who's actually in charge of patient adherence? Because it turns out that's me. I'm the one in charge of
Right.
patient adherence. You can give as many tools to my doctor, my pharmacist, and my therapist, but the person who makes sure the kids take their medications and the husband goes to the follow-up visits and the parents do the things that they're supposed to do and the other folks actually do all of the things, that's me. That all exists entirely on my watch. And I had better tools for travel volleyball at the time than I had to manage my family's health information. And that was really the genesis. I called my then co-founder at the time and asked her, I said, so what do you think about this? And she said, well, interestingly, right? So I was in my late 40s, managing, traditional family, 2.4 kids and a dog, right? And had all the stuff. She was a single woman in her 30s. And she said, and had just lost a friend to cancer. And she said, this is absolutely a need. I just got done carrying around a 3-ring binder with 5 of my best girlfriends managing the care for our closest friend who recently passed away. And so, that was really the genesis of us launching out on this 1,000+ hours of user research, just really talking to people about how they manage information. And while what they were dealing with was incredibly different from person to person, the way in which they were managing it was wildly the same, highly ineffective and incredibly fragmented, very frustrating and very isolating.
Uh, I mean, anybody who has a family and or a circle of friends and is starting to either be responsible as the kin keeper or understand that people get ill and people age. And anybody who's ever tried, as I've tried and failed miserably, to track all of my own doctors, specialists, pharmacy, primary care physician, and just trying, it's like herding cats, is to kind of get it all to fit together, understands the value of it. But what has been so far your experience in terms of adoption, feedback? I mean, obviously you've had the 1,000 hours of conversation. You were talking recently when we spoke about pitching this kind of tool to a university with going on 100,000 students. I mean, clearly, as you said, this is kind of timely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, to your point, it's timely. Interestingly, it's timely for a whole host of reasons, not the least of which has been the pandemic. But one of the things that's been really valuable and important to me is, look, we've been at consumer health tools for 20, 25 years in this country, and we've really struggled, right? And the system keeps criticizing the humans, right? And they're like, well, people don't want to engage in their health. They're just not interested. They're not going to do it. And I'm like, I don't know that that's true. We just keep giving them tools that are fragmented, that have one piece of information in them that don't reflect the way in which they manage information in real life. And we said, look, I really fundamentally believe that if you build a tool that allows people to do the things they're already doing, just do them better. People want to make notes. They want to store documents. They want to take pictures of everything from rashes to discharge procedures. They want to be able to record quick notes about things that they need. They don't want to fill out forms. People told us very clearly, there's no NA in my binder. There's no NA in my real life. So when we went about this, we really tried to mirror existing human behaviors, because that's the kiss of death in any consumer tool, is trying to change humans, right? So for us, we spent over 1,000 hours, I said, in user research, but then we spent over probably about 14 months in a beta version of the tool, really trying to get to that engagement. And so we launched earlier this year, earlier in 2024, and we've got users who downloaded this app in March and have used it over 600 times, individual users since March. And I was excited, actually, just last week. Yeah, this question is timely. Just last week, we got a review that somebody posted. I think it was either on the App Store or Google Play. And she said, "This is the first tool I found that actually works like I think." And it actually almost makes me well up a little bit, because that was the goal, right? That was the goal, is to try to help build something that really supports the people who are in this situation. Because the reality is, look, if you're using our tool, it's not because you needed a new hobby. You've got something going on. There's something in your life that's stressful, that's anxiety provoking, and you need to be able to come in and do something quick, do something simple, do something that feels intuitive to you and that really makes your life easier. That's what we're trying to do. We don't want to add something. We don't want to make this something that you have to plan and manage and organize. I own the company, and I didn't go back and put anything in the day I started. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the second best time is today. So the next time you spend 2 hours looking for a document, or pay your pediatrician another $5 to get a copy of the vaccination records that you lost 6 months ago, and now you got to pay them to get them back again, snap a picture of them and stick them in your KinKeeper. And that makes it easier in the future. We always say, our goal is so that future you will thank you.
Yeah, the analogy of the planting a tree is really powerful because of people living longer, but also understanding with the global pandemic really shined a light on our limitations and what we don't have access to. And I guess my curiosity is, it's now a question about the app from a functional perspective. One of the things that I hear you saying over and over again is, throughout your research and throughout the alpha testing and all of those kind of conversations, is you wanted to make it as easy as possible to kind of slip easily into how they use it in their own day in, day out health management. And I guess my question is, the data import, the data integration, what's that like from a user perspective?
Yeah. So as of about 3 months ago, you can import your health records from over 35,000 different health systems nationwide. And so what you do is you go in, you put in your username and password, and it will highlight all of the importable records that come from that health system, or that, whether it's a clinic or the like, and you can choose what you want to import directly into your KinKeeper.
So just out of curiosity, where is that picking that up? Is that picking it up, let's say, United Healthcare contacts or primary care physician? How is that capturing? I guess the question is the extent of manual input versus the automation of it, so it's as seamless as possible.
Yeah. So there's two different ways that you can bring information in. As I mentioned, the import, that's pulling directly from your health records. So there's interoperability requirements that were put out by the ONC a couple of years ago that are now enforceable, that require that companies who are providing information to patients through electronic health records actually provide it to third-party apps like ours via API, so direct integration. And so we do that through our partner Fasten Health. And they provide us with that access to all of that information to directly provide that to our members. But we know that the reality is, that's a piece of what you're managing, right? A piece of what people are managing. Right. And I think that's the challenge that we've struggled with in the last couple of decades, is the health systems have assumed that, and I don't mean this in the pejorative way it sounds, but like, they're focused on getting you health data, right? They want to get you medical data. What we want to be able to do is put that clinical data right alongside of the non-clinical data that you're managing day in, day out. Those, again, those symptoms, notes, questions, reactions, reminders, all that information that you need to be able to show up, lean in, be a first-class citizen in your health. That all of that information needs to coexist in one place in order for you to advocate and tell your story. And that's why it was important for us to be able to ensure that you can both import data and input data.
Yeah, the input from a manual perspective, but the import from it, making it as easy as possible to automate. And I guess my fascination, because we've spoken about this already, but I'd love for you to share with the audience. You've talked about your 20 years, of experience in healthcare. You've talked about the journey so far with Kith and Kin. And I guess my question is for you, where do you see Kith and Kin in 2025? Like where would you love to go? And as you kind of introduce this, and it is going to be extremely well received.
Yeah. Look, I would love to be as ubiquitous as your Apple Health wallet, right? Where you want to put your financial or your information in one place so that it's accessible and shareable and usable the way you want that information. I would love in 2025, if I go into my doctor's office when I leave, especially say I'm seeing a new doctor, I'll be like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, my appointment's done. This is great. Can you just, can I export that to my KinKeeper? Can you send that to my KinKeeper? Exactly. Can you just, can you send that to my KinKeeper? Perfect. Great. I don't need to log into something. I don't need to access. All that information comes to me instead of me chasing it. And that's the shift for me that matters out of this, because I want people to have to stop chasing their information when it comes to healthcare. I want their health information to all come to them, all of their information for all of their people, all in one place. I believe that should be a human right, that I should be able to have that information. I should be able to advocate. I should be able to tell my story. And I believe fundamentally that will change health outcomes in this country, because I think there are so many fantastic institutions, fantastic leaders, but we're so fragmented. And there's so many sites of service, so many different ways you can access care, that the only place that information comes together today is with the human. And they're already underwater. They're already overwhelmed. And now they're expected to be the project manage their healthcare on top of dealing with the health issues themselves. Yeah. We have to shift that paradigm. That is just too much. We keep talking about, you see these graphics, right, where they have like the human-centered healthcare, right, where there's like the circle and there's the person in the middle. The reality is it should be like this. This is what it looks like. It should be tipped this way and the humans under this going like this. Oh my God, how am I going to manage all of this stuff? Yeah. That's what it really looks like in human-centered healthcare, is it all falls on the human at the end of the day. And we have to shift that paradigm.
And that's kind of one of the things that I came away with when we spoken previously, and I want to ask the question again, is to get my head around it, is from that, what you just said, therefore, where's the focus in terms of your ability to be the tip of the spear to shift the paradigm? Because I would imagine, as much as people need this, the consumer piece, is that the primary focus for you moving forward? Are you
that's a great question.
Healthcare providers, like where do you see the greatest leverage in terms of kind of Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill?
That's funny. That is the analogy I use constantly.
I know you do, which is why we've talked about this.
That's my whole world. And so I believe that consumer, kind of that direct to consumer, is a piece of it. And the reason behind that is I needed to start consumer first, because one of the other big challenges in this space over the last 20 or 30 years is that people built solutions and sold them to and through employers, payers, providers, and that had one piece of information. And then when the person no longer saw that provider, had that insurance carrier, was with that employer, their information was lost or frozen. it was frustrating for people. It created a disincentive to use the solutions, which is why we started consumer first. So we are a fully portable solution. So if it comes to you through your payer, your provider, your and your employer, when you don't have that relationship anymore, you pick it up, pick it back up. You can keep the free version. You can do a monthly subscription if you want all the features for $4 a month. So it needed to be both accessible and affordable. And so that was where we started, and we started there very, very deliberately. But now, to your point, where the tip of the spear is for us finding those places where they have an incentive to improve the quality of life of the person who is managing that information, the KinKeeper. And that's why this is a little bit different, right? Because when we think about patient portals, right, that's accessible by the patient. The patient can't always take care of themselves, right? The patient isn't always the one in charge of their health per se, right? At our core, we're always in charge of us, but there's a whole number of periods of time during our life where somebody else will be responsible for our health and well-being. So for us, this really is a tool about that KinKeeper. So to your earlier point, we're going to market through the couple places, employee benefits, right? Where we started off that conversation, where we know that those caregivers, those KinKeepers, those are somebody's employee. And they're quietly quitting because they have two jobs, one that works them harder than any job they could ever imagine and is entirely unpaid, right, as this caregiver. And it's overwhelming, and they have no way to share information or share the load. They have all the stuff and they know all the stuff, and therefore they're in charge of all the stuff. They become indispensable in their family, and that ultimately takes a toll on their ability to work and be effective employees. And that's unfortunate. That should never happen. We should not be treating our caregivers this way in this country. We know what a critical gap they fill between and among the fragmented nature of our health systems. We need to be able to give them better tools. We give them fantastic tools at work, and then we expect that somehow magically all of these things will just appear for them at home, and they just don't exist. And we need to be able to invest in those. We need to be able to think differently about the ways in which we support those individuals, and the way, back to your very earliest comment about work-life integration, because look, we've been, chasing work-life balance for 30 years now, and that implies that those two somehow are separate, right? And that you can balance the two. You can't, right? You have to just integrate. You have to figure out how to make the two work together. And that means you need as good a tools at home to manage all the other things that you're in charge of as you have at work. And we need to start thinking differently about how we support those caregivers, those KinKeepers in the workplace.
So powerful. And I'm really, more than you could even imagine, so appreciative of how you touched upon the notion, the fallacy of work-life balance versus what you educated me on, which was the notion of there needs to be a rethinking of this in terms of an integrative model from the caregiver's perspective. And that's why this is, I think so much of this is so powerful. And I used the word before as timely, and you were kind enough to expand that and say this has been decades in the work. So if somebody, Jill, you and I could go on forever, which is why we're going to have another one of these. But in the meantime, if somebody said, you know what, I really would like to talk to Jill or reach out to her and talk about this, whether they're a KinKeeper themselves or their employee benefit or their healthcare provider, or anybody who can help you kind of push the boulder, how would they get in touch with you?
Oh, yeah. They just email me at jill@kithandkin.app. So KITHANDKIN.app.
And by the way, all of your contact details for anybody who wants to get in touch with Jill, it's going to be in the description below. So be sure to check out all of her contact details and reach out to her. Jill, really, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing the amazing work you've been doing throughout your career and with Kith and Kin, because as we have talked about, this is something that's critically in need. I can't even begin to tell you how much I started talking about the work you're doing, and I'll continue to share it. But thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it so very, very much.
My pleasure.